I recently hiked and filmed for my channel the Great Glen Way from Fort William to Inverness, and that route follows the Caledonian Canal, probably one of Scotland's greatest waterways and engineered by Thomas Telford. That canal connected the Atlantic Ocean to the North Sea, not only saving thousands of marine hours, but also no doubt many lives in the treacherous waters surrounding Scotland. It was considered one of the greatest civil engineering achievements of its time, and its legacy is still in use even today. Back home, my curiosity grew, and although canals are by default flat, and yet I'm a mountaineer at heart, there's something curious about traversing these great civil engineering wonders. But there was another route in Scotland that stood out, linking two of Scotland's greatest cities. In the east, Edinburgh, and to the west, Glasgow. Edinburgh's canal, the Union, was engineered by Hugh Baird, and Glasgow's, the Forth and Clyde Canal, was primarily engineered by John Smeaton, and by many he is considered the father of civil engineering. And now, on a weeks-long adventure, I'm going to be traversing these great waterways, but this time, I'm going to be doing it on a bike. The Union was built on the back of the Forth and Clyde, and if it wasn't for that canal, the Union would have probably never been built. So following in the footsteps of its chief engineer John Smeaton, I want to not only have an adventure, but also understand how the canal was built and how it's used even today, and why it fell out of favour and then into disrepair and eventual closure. But with the power of community, commerce and millennium funding, it was restored to its former glory, and how today it has become truly one of the world's finest canals. This is the story of the Union and the Forth and Clyde Canal, and the legacy of John Smeaton, the father of civil engineering. The first landmark you encounter as you leave Edinburgh Quay is the Leamington Lift Bridge. The bridge is operated by staff from Scottish Canals, but the bridge was physically moved in 1922 when the original basins were infilled and Edinburgh Quay became the new terminus. I've literally left Bridge 1 about 500 metres back down the canal, and yet already I'm in this blue-green corridor escaping the city. And I guess that's what I find quite incredible about canals. You know, there are these corridors through these urban environments, but they do allow you to have a sense of escapism. It was really nice to see a canal boat. I know you're going to say, well, it's a canal, you're going to get canal boats, but actually the Union is quite a quiet canal, so you don't see many boats. I mean, perhaps I might see 10 during the whole day. One's actually navigated the canal, so that was really cool. And I think they were actually from New Zealand, going by their accents as they said hello. But yeah, good to have at least one canal boat on the Union Canal. It's quite funny how this little project has come about. When I was making my Great Glen film for my YouTube channel, I popped into the Fort Augustus Visitor Centre, basically to pinch their electricity and do a little bit of charging and have a cheeky cup of coffee. But in the corner there was a meeting going on, and there was a chap called Richard Miller, who's the Chief Operations Officer for Scottish Canals, and we got chatting, and I was telling him that I was making a film and that I'd come from a broadcast background, mostly Nat Geo and the BBC and the like, and that I was, going to traverse this great waterway and, like I say, make a film. And we kept in contact by email, as you do. And basically, a few months ago, he dropped me a line and said, hey, Kevin, you know what? If you really fancy it, you should do the Union and link it with the Forth and Clyde Canal. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to give it a go, because it turns out that it's actually the 300th anniversary of the chief engineer, John Smeaton. And if it wasn't for John Smeaton, who built the bulk section of the Forth and Clyde, the Union really probably wouldn't have existed. So I thought, hey, come on, let's go and make a little film and get on a bike this time, actually given by Scottish Canals, and tell this story about the Union and the Forth and Clyde. Just behind me is the Slateford Viaduct, spanning just over 152 metres, and it's one of 3 viaducts that I'm going to find on the Union Canal. There's something to note about the Union Canal is it's a contour canal. It doesn't have flights of locks, because basically what it does is it hugs, and I think it's the 80-metre contour line. So of course when you come across rivers, and below me is the River Leith, you have to build a viaduct, and that would have been a huge undertaking back in the day. So I've actually decided, and probably quite wisely so, to push my bike across 152 metres of Slateford Viaduct. Hello. It's a little bit narrow, this towpath, and it's cobblestones, and it's a bit slippy, and I do not fancy sampling the magnificent water of the Union Canal. Anyway, I also wanted to get the drone out, but it's actually quite windy, and I've only got 5 batteries with me, and as you probably know, flying a drone in the wind really sucks your batteries, so I'm going to save the drone for later. I know this would make for a magnificent shot, but there's lots more to come, although this is one of 3 aqueducts on the Union. But yeah, I'm glad I'm not riding my bike on these cobbles, because it's a train. It is a little bit challenging, and I'm not a great swimmer. Anyway, let's get cracking. This canal is beautiful, really, really beautiful. There's obviously narrow boats, walkers, joggers, cyclists, even a horse, a rider. But remember that the Union Canal was not built for pleasure, far from it. It was an industrial superhighway of its time for transporting all kinds of goods, but you know, things like primarily coal and things like that. But also, just behind me in Hell's Quarry, this whole area was completely devastated to extract sandstone. Now, if you know Edinburgh, some of the most spectacular houses and tenements and buildings, and most of that sandstone came from here. And of course, you know, 150 years later, it's been fully restored, and it's just a park. But just imagine the amount of work and labouring that went on in this park, and all thanks to the Union Canal and its ability to transport goods. I'm really liking the Union Canal, actually. It's really peaceful, and everyone is really chatty. And one of the problems I've had is that every time I stop, people start chatting, and I'm like, and I like chatting, but I've got a very tight schedule. But this is really nice. So my plan for the day is to make the Avon Viaduct. I'm not quite sure how I'm getting on time-wise, because filming, oops, there's some users coming along, oops, be careful. Filming is taking up a lot of time, as you can appreciate. So I'm hoping I'm going to reach the Avon Viaduct. That's a magnificent viaduct, by the way, but that's in about 25 kilometres. 25 kilometres on a bike is nothing, but when you keep on filming and all that stuff, it really slows you down. Oops, there's more cobbles coming along. I don't like cobbles, so I'm going to get off and push the bike. Actually, no, I'm going to challenge myself. Can I do this? Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyway, I challenged myself to the cobbles. I was just cycling and I saw people litter picking, and I've grabbed someone, she's called Carol from Scottish Canals, and I hate litter, so I thought it was really opportunist to just grab you and ask you sort of some questions about what you're doing. I mean, why are you doing it, Carol?
I'm the volunteer coordinator for Scottish Canals, and I spend a lot of my time out in the canal bank doing litter picks with corporate groups and volunteers.
And people give their time to...
People give their time up. They actively seek opportunities for corporate businesses, or actively seeking opportunities, pretty much find out what area they're in, and then we just take them out on the canal, give them a list of opportunities they can get involved in, but litter picking is very popular, and unfortunately it's very needed.
Where are the sort of the worst points on the canals?
I think where it's highly populated, we have a lot of litter in those areas, a lot of people, a lot of footfall using the towpath. But then quite randomly, nice wee spots where you didn't think there would be a lot of litter, we often find quite a bit lying about as well. So there's no rhyme nor reason to it, I'm afraid. It's just where people are, there's litter.
And it's not just an eyesore, but it's also an ecological problem. Yep. Because of wildlife and birds and
yep,
fish.
Absolutely. I think we've seen some horrific pictures of ducks with the plastic rings round their neck from cans, 4 packs of cans and things like that. So it's not great at all for the environment, and we're trying our best to make sure that we can make it as pleasant as we can for everybody that uses it and all the wildlife.
Well, you're doing a brilliant work, Carol.
Thank you.
I have a real dislike for litter, especially plastic litter. So thank you very much for keeping it. I was just noticing how beautiful it is and how clean it is, and it's because of you and your volunteers. Well,
it's definitely stunning, and we definitely do make an impact. So the more we're out, the better it is. I think it discourages people when it's a clean area to drop litter. If there's a lot of litter there, people just think another wee bit, doesn't matter. So, and I think it's really nice. We get a lot of praise when people are walking by and they see us out doing it. They think we're doing a grand job, and a lot of people appreciate it. So it makes you go home with a wee warm feeling in your heart that you've done something good for the day.
Well, that was a bit of luck, bumping into Carol from Scottish Canals and her team of litter pickers who are eagerly beavering away to keep the Union Canal clean. Now, I have a real dislike, a real hatred towards litter. I cannot abide it, especially plastic litter. I do not understand the mentality of anyone that deliberately leaves and drops litter. I don't get it. But anyway, enough of that. Well done, Carol and her volunteers. And actually, I'm already going to be planning to meet up with quite a few people from Scottish Canals as I traverse both the Union and then later the Forth and Clyde, because it takes a whole army to keep this heritage alive and thriving. So during this trip, like I say, I'm going to meet up with people because I want to understand their role in what it means to maintain and keep this beautiful blue-green highway alive. Well, I've made it to the outskirts of Edinburgh, and as you might be able to hear by the noise, there's a lot of traffic below me. And the reason why it's below me is because I'm on the second aqueduct. This is the Scott Russell aqueduct, built in 1987, engineered by, coincidentally, the chap called Scott Russell. But what a glorious day! What a glorious day. And it's quite sort of bizarre to think that, you know, when this canal was built by Hugh Baird, it was a central highway. It was the motorway of its era. And now that's been superseded by constructions like this. But I'm so glad that this canal was restored, because if we'd have lost it, what a travesty, what a travesty, what a loss. And as I look down the Union Canal, there's the third canal boat of my day. Awesome, absolutely awesome. What an amazing place to be. Above a motorway with a canal boat coming straight towards me. What a beautiful little bridge. Bridge 14. So peaceful. So peaceful. I can't believe I'm sandwiched between Scotland's 2 biggest cities. And this, there's a car going over the bridge. Yeah, this beautiful, quiet, peaceful Union Canal is actually a lot better than I expected. I know the Forth and Clyde Canal is wider, more industrious, goes through more urban areas, but for the moment, I'm really enjoying the Union Canal, and it's little gems like this that make it all worthwhile. And I just stumbled across this sign that's been placed. It's a modern sign, but it says in 1832 to Edinburgh, 7 miles that away, it was 6D. Now, I was born in 1971, and I think that was the year that it changed from the old imperial system to the decimal system, so I'm not sure how much 6D was. I reckon it wasn't a lot by today's prices. And of course, this canal wasn't just used to transport goods, it was also used to transport people, and it did very well actually, until this little thing called the railway came along, and that buggered it all up, because of course, you know, Glasgow to Edinburgh by rail is significantly quicker than Glasgow to Edinburgh by canal boat, albeit this is a relaxing and peaceful way. So in a way, this sign, this modern sign, is a hark back to those bygone days when the Union Canal was a real transport hub. You know, a lot of people in the adventure community would say, why on earth walk or even cycle along a towpath? Because, you know, the modern canals are meant for canal boats. You know, why walk along a flat path? And, you know, there's a small element of truth in that. I mean, it's not a challenge by any stretch of the imagination. But what I'm loving about this little journey is that with every twist and bend, there's something different. I wasn't expecting this. This is Rathole Marina. As you can see, it's rather picturesque, modern, but picturesque. And the weather, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this. I've bought my waterproofs, that's for sure. What I didn't bring was sunscreen. Anyway, onward and upward, heading along, and I'm hoping to be able to reach the Avon Aqueduct later on today, but I'm not actually that sure that with the amount of filming that I'm able to do because of this glorious sunshine, I'm going to reach that target. The thing that astounds me is the amount of bridges they had to build. This is bridge number 24, and to build a stone bridge is no meagre undertaking, but then they had to keep this 80-metre contour line, and in fact my GPS on my phone has been stuck on this 80-metre contour line the whole way. Otherwise they would have had to build lock gates, and that is a completely different undertaking. So 80 metres straight and level, and then you encounter these beautiful stone bridges that allow access to other parts of the country. But I really love them. Something to consider about the Union Canal is actually, and probably why it's more picturesque than perhaps the Forth and Clyde, is because it's more intimate. You know, it's not a wide canal, but then it didn't have to be, because it just basically transported goods internally. Whereas of course the Forth and Clyde, which we're going to see later, was basically a sea navigation lock to save going round the treacherous Cape Wrath Peninsula. So obviously that canal needed to be a lot wider and a lot deeper. But the Union is definitely a lot more picturesque and a lot more intimate, and I'm absolutely loving it, especially with this weather. Oh my God, I actually just had to put some sun cream on my wee head. What a beautiful glorious day, but I'm sure that tomorrow isn't going to be the same. I think the weather is afoot. I'll tell you something, it's so warm, it's lovely. But a little update. One of the challenges of doing an adventure like this is where you're going to camp, you know. Officially, you're not really allowed to camp along the canals, but It's not like I'm going to put this on the internet and they'll find out. But anyway, I was going to camp by an amazing aqueduct, the Avon Aqueducts, but then I just sussed out to do that I wanted to camp by the river, which would have meant getting this bike with all its stuff down some very difficult sort of rocky steps and then getting it up in the morning. I thought that's not going to work. So I've just searched on the Google God, and there's a campsite in Linlithgow in about 6 or 7 miles. So I'm going to head off to there and I'm going to camp in a campsite tonight. And then tomorrow the plan will be to do some proper filming in Linlithgow, because that's a beautiful town and it happens to be the birthplace of Scotty from Star Trek. Apparently in about 200 years time he's going to be born there. So that's an interesting place to be. But Linlithgow is where I'm going, and the campsite at Linlithgow. So I'll do some filming there. And then tomorrow is going to be an awesome day as I do the final leg of the Union Canal heading towards Falkirk. That's the plan, and I hope the weather does me proud.
One feature you cannot avoid to miss is the Green Dykes Bing. It is the prodigy of extracting oil from shale. On average, you only get 10 barrels of oil per 7 tonnes of shale, and the consequence of this is dumping over 15 million tonnes of waste onto the landscape. But hopefully it will be fully reclaimed by nature, and it won't look like too much of a blot on the Scottish landscape.
I've done quite a few cycling trips in my life, and the biggest cycling trip I've done, which is also on my channel, was a circumnavigation of Iceland, which took nearly a month with my friend Rob Small. But anyway, but I am so impressed with this route. I really am. I think this is a friggin' awesome cycle route. You know, but not only that, I mean, obviously you can walk it, you can cycle it, you can paddle it, or you can go on a narrow boat. So it's such a versatile walk. But yeah, it's flat, but the landscape does keep on changing, and there's so many interesting little things that you stumble across. So this is definitely, I wasn't expecting it to be as good as this actually. I'm absolutely loving the cycling.
One such quirky feature is the M8 motorway. Once the canal had closed, these new motorways just bulldozed their way on top. But in May 2000, this tunnel was opened to celebrate the rebirth of the Union Canal. I decided to abandon my idea about trying to find a campsite and opted for a wild campsite instead.
Well, my plans didn't quite go to plan. I was planning on finding a campsite, but I ended up getting sent down this gravel track up a hill, and I'm not kitted out to go down gravel tracks or up hills. The bike's way too heavy, and it's not really meant for that. It's a Scottish Canals bike for the canals. And anyway, so I found this little clearing. It's really cool. I really love it. Just a nice peaceful little clearing. I suppose that is one of the challenges of doing a canal, is that, you know, camping is more challenging than if you're on open terrain like on the Cape Wrath Trail or something like that. But tent is up, dinner is calling. It's been a really long day. I was up at 5, it's now 7 o'clock. So it's been a really long day, but tomorrow's a shortish day to Falkirk. It's about 12-13 miles, but I am meeting up with a couple of people from Scottish Canals and be exploring the kind of work and stuff they get up to. So that's the plan for tomorrow. It's a relatively easy day, but it's been a pretty awesome day. I must admit, the weather's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed the cycling. I've really enjoyed the Union Canal. That the last little bit to Falkirk, and then the Union is done before it merges with the Forth and Clyde. But that is another story.
I woke up to a glorious new day and decided to head into the town of Linlithgow, famous because it's the birthplace of Mary Queen of Scots and of course Scotty from Star Trek.
So I'm back back on track in Linlithgow. Beautiful little village, absolutely stunning. I wish I had more time. I think you could almost make a little film about this little place. Lots of history, beautiful, beautiful little Scottish town. Anyway, Union Canal behind me, canal boats there. One thing I have learned is, and I know this from other sort of biking expeditions, you know, you see a campsite or place you want to stay at, and it doesn't look that far on the map, but when you start going off route, you can lose so much time. I reckon that slight little detour just to find a place to camp probably cost me about 2 hours worth of cycling, you know, there and back, and then trying to find the track and the route. So, you know, in hindsight, it isn't really the best strategy. So my advice would be, if you are going to do this Union Canal journey, either really work out where you're going to camp, or you're going to have to bite the bullet and stay in a B&B. But even then, you might have to go off route. I might mention to Scottish Canals, it could be handy to have little spots where you can camp if you're on foot or on a bike, because then you could really access the canal properly. Anyway, weather is still good, so fingers crossed. And today I'm meeting two people from Scottish Canals, but more about that later. Something I didn't realise until recently is that the Union Canal is also part of the John Muir Way. John Muir is one of the most famous conservationists in Scotland, and in fact, if you're watching this film in the States, you may well have heard of the name John Muir also. And this is where the path rejoins the Union Canal. Now that John Muir Way is definitely something I want to check out for my YouTube channel. So please, please, please do subscribe and stay tuned for lots more of these kind of adventures to come. This is the Avon Aqueduct. It's the third and final of my aqueducts on this route, and arguably the grandest, and it crosses the river Avon, which is also associated with the south of England, but there is a river Avon in Scotland. Well, I know that for a fact because this aqueduct is crossing it, and it's also where I was going to camp. And if I spin the camera around and just track back a bit, I don't know if you can see that, but down there is the track to access the river. Now, I'm definitely not a stunt rider, and I don't think I could have got my bike down there. So I think even walking down there could be a little bit of a challenge with all the overgrown grass and everything. So anyway, so I'm glad I camped where I camped. But this is a stunning aqueduct, really amazing. And it was also helped and engineered by Thomas Telford as well. He gave his hand to building the aqueducts as well on the Union Canal, because he was the Grand Master of aqueduct building. Anyway, beautiful day, getting there, another probably, I don't know, 5-6 hours, and we'll reach the end at Falkirk, and I'm looking forward to that. I can get my wee tent up there and get some nice rest before I hit the Forth and Clyde Canal. So I'm planning to rendezvous with a chap called George, and George works for Scottish Canals, and he's going to explain and show me the incredible breach of the Union Canal that happened a few years ago. Now when I say a breach, I don't just mean a little hole. Literally the entire canal collapsed, and you can imagine what happened to the water. Anyway, he's going to tell me all about that. So I think probably about another couple of kilometres before I bump into him. He said he will be easy to spot because he will be wearing a reflective jacket, and as regulations for Scottish Canal personnel, he'll probably be wearing a life jacket as well, even though he stood on terra firma. Mind you, it wasn't terra firma when that breach happened, that's for sure. Anyway, it's going to be quite interesting. I'm really quite excited to hear about this, because I know it was a hell of an event. I see a man in a very, very reflective vest. I think I think I've spotted him. Are you George? What a coincidence! Oh, I'm six. I'm 6 minutes late. Apologies.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh, fantastic! Let me get off my bike, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
we can
Sure.
we can talk about what happened
Of
here.
course. Yeah, not a problem at all.
Cheers.
Yep, more than happy. Yeah.
I've heard so much about this breach. I had a chat with one of your archivists, Chris, and he said, "Oh, Kevin, when you do the Union Canal, right?" He says, "You've got to visit the breach because we had a breach in the canal." And I thought, "Oh yeah, you know, a few litres went over the side." This was a big breach. What were you working when it happened? What happened?
I was a duty engineer, unfortunately, on that very morning when the Union Canal breached here at Avon. I got a call at 7:05 in the morning on the 12th of August 2020 from Head of Engineering, Peter Robinson. And Peter's words, and I quote, "We have a leak at Avon."
Right.
And I thought, okay, I've been in the organisation 43 years. I've had a lot of experience of dealing with leaks. However, what did transpire was the leak wasn't a leak, it was a breach. We had lost the embankment here, embankment 78 on the north side of the Union Canal. So my role was to get the framework contractor here to site ASAP with whatever they could get their hands on and stem either side, build temporary dams at either side here of the breach. Luckily enough, we've got a bridge just up here on the west side, and we've got a bridge down here on the east side. Where it narrows on the bridge, that was the ideal place to put temporary dams in.
Right.
So they got 1 ton bags of material, of gravel, dropped them in with lorries from Hiabs very, very quickly. And that didn't completely stop the flow, but it contained the flow. It reduced the flow to a manageable level. In theory, we could have lost circa 52 kilometres of canal of water.
So hang on a minute. So if you hadn't had that kind of contingency plan in place, literally the whole of the Union Canal would have drained into that field below.
It was coming out here. Yeah, it was coming out here at a vast volume. A vast volume was coming out of here of water. And we lost the whole embankment, and we lost 2/3 of the canal channel out here, right down to the, you could actually see the puddle clay, how they built it 200 years ago, standing in the eye of the breach. And looking at that, you could see how they actually constructed the canal.
George explained how heavy rain had created a surge of water in the surrounding area, and how that had started to lap over the edges. And bit by bit, it started to remove the topsoil from the embankment, like a child's sandcastle being lapped by the waves. Eventually, enough material was eroded, and over the course of the night, that led to the catastrophic collapse of the embankment and the inevitable breach.
Once it started to come over,
Yeah.
it started to erode the soft material. The Union Canal embankments are as dug. So what they took from the channel, they deposited here and just built the embankment, and then they clay lined it, and it's the clay lining that holds the water. So the minute that material here, that 200-year-old material, started to erode, it just perpetuated itself, and that's what happened. The whole embankment breached.
The repair costs ran into the millions, but George explained that the work undertaken here would future-proof this part of the canal against future extreme weather events.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad that you've taken some time out to meet me, because I knew this was a key and an interesting story on the Union. I mean, not just a little breach, but I just can't imagine all of this water pouring into the farmer's field and onto the railway line.
Just to get a sense of scale, apparently over 11,000 fish were rescued in nearby farmers' fields, an indication of just how much water had escaped.
I think actually what you just said there, George, gives it a context that so much water escaped that it was able to create its own mini lake, and fish were able to survive until you basically rescued them.
We had fish in ponds all the way through here, through the forestry, and even beyond the railway there was a farmer's field, and it had a big puddle in it, and we got fish in there. And that from this location must be, I would think, about a quarter of a mile that way, and yet we got fish. We got fish in that pond.
I'd really enjoyed meeting up with George, and now I was on my way to another rendezvous. I met up with Dr. Olivia Lassiere, who is the Chief Environment Officer for Scottish Canals. I wanted to better understand the industrial legacy and its impact this had on this great canal.
So the canal was built in the 1820s, between 1818 and 1822. So it recently had its bicentenary, 200-year-old birthday. And it was built to break this monopoly for people selling coal to the folk in Edinburgh at a high price with taxes. It bought a lot of it from Newcastle. And what it allowed was coal from the west, from Glasgow area, the Glasgow coalfields, to come along by barge into Edinburgh at a much cheaper rate. But because we had this amazing waterway, suddenly it became a route for industry to move stuff backwards and forwards. Before, people had horses and carts, very difficult to carry heavy quantities of material. Suddenly you could move 20 tonnes at a time with a single horse, move stuff up and down. Industry sprung up, a lot of these industries needed water, so it was a perfect combination of a transport route for your workers, for your materials, transport out for the goods that you produced, out to the docks and the other end of the country. And yeah, it meant that industry just flourished along here, and it was such a different place to how it is today.
I asked Olivia why she had chosen this particular location to meet.
This bridge is an indication of that post-industrial past. This was put here in the 1930s for vehicular traffic to go from the factory on one side of the canal over this side, over to this side, up on the hillside here. All the workers, they didn't get to use this bridge. They had to go on the stone bridge way down there, which you can see in the distance.
Olivia explained that the site was once used for the location of the production of explosive detonators used in the Great War. The factory was owned by Alfred Nobel, the same Alfred Nobel who, ironically, later went on to create the Nobel Peace Prize. However, a byproduct of creating explosives, including dynamite, was the use of mercury. A legacy that would eventually need to be cleaned up, and this was left in the hands of Scottish Canals as they reopened the waterways as part of the Millennium Rejuvenation.
And we estimated there was something in the region of 72,000 tonnes of contaminated sediment in there. So I spoke to the environmental regulators, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, and we worked out the best way to deal with this was to remove it, make it safe, and put it somewhere safe, so if in the future there's a way of extracting the mercury, we can. So we took all the material out, set up a wee factory just along here, which mixed all the wet sediment, you can imagine sloppy, muddy stuff, mixed it with ash from a power station. And then it makes something solid, which we then take to a landfill site, which is all properly protected. And so in the future, we should be able to potentially remove it and use that mercury again. So it was my job to spend £5 million 25 years ago to clean it up.
And you did it?
We did it. We spent 60 weeks, so over a year. We had barges moving up and down, dredging for a whole 60 weeks. We then drained down all the water and then took it all out, what was left in the dry. Took it all to the landfill site, so out of the canal.
Wow, fantastic. It's
Cleaned it all up.
It's quite incredible when you actually, you know, just biking along the canal, you don't necessarily appreciate all the stories and all the history and all the goings on that made this canal possible. You know, I see it as this sort of leisure corridor, but that's not
tranquil,
but that's not why it was built.
No, and so you're right. It's hard to sort of imagine this hustle and bustle of industrial activity. And now we come here today. There's a couple of swans with their cygnets dabbling around in the water. It's a place of peace. And to me, it seems like an amazing sort of circularity, really, of the story.
Yeah.
Alfred Nobel had a factory here building detonators for the war effort. When he died, his legacy of his millions that he made doing that, he decided to put it into a prize for celebrating the best endeavours of human beings, one of which was a peace prize. And here we find ourselves in Falkirk today, where all this money was made, but now it's a time of peace and green tranquility and a cleaned up environment.
It was quite interesting chatting with Olivia. I'd spoken to her quite a lot on the phone actually when planning this trip, and you certainly do get an appreciation of the amount of work that they had to do when it came to restoring the canals after they were closed. It's not just a question of, you know, opening up a few lock gates It's such a shame that the heritage had been lost, but also such vision that it was able to be restored. And now, of course, it's become this amazing leisure location, leisure and environmental location, not only for people but for wildlife as well. And that's really what the Union Canal is nowadays. It was obviously built for commerce and trade, but of course now in the 21st century it plays a massive part in the welfare of everybody, including wildlife. So what a great legacy to leave behind. When Hugh Baird built the canal, he would have never envisaged that this would have been its true legacy some 200 or so years later. This is definitely the highlight on my trip. It's the Falkirk Tunnel, and it's 630 metres long. Now, building tunnels nowadays is still an engineering marvel, but back then, 200 years ago, literally they had to blast their way through using dynamite and the sheer will and force of the navvies, mostly Irish labourers who dug their way through this. Now, 2 of those navvies went down in history, but for the wrong reasons.
They were Mr. Burke and a Mr. Hare, who became notorious murderers, claiming the lives of 17 people. Their motive was to sell the bodies to anatomist Dr. Knox from Edinburgh for macabre dissection. Hare escaped execution by giving King's evidence against Burke, who was later hanged in 1829 for his crimes.
This is a really, really cool place. It really is spooky, but it has kind of atmospheric temperature changes which kind of add to that spooky feel. What an awesome place, but I just can't believe the sheer grit and willpower these men had. This is blasting through rock and digging by hand, by pick, hammer. What an awesome place. Thank you, Mr. Burke and Hare. You could have done other great things in life, but you chose murder.
That tunnel was really, really amazing. I really, really loved it. I think I must have spent probably a good 30 minutes in there. What an amazing place. And this, for me, really, to be honest, is what it means to experience adventure travel. Obviously, I'd done a little bit of research about this trip and I knew that this was coming, but to experience it for real far exceeded my expectations. And in fact, to be brutally honest, this whole Union Canal has far exceeded my expectations. I knew it would be pretty, and I knew there'd be some spectacular scenery and some views and some aqueducts and tunnels and all that stuff, but I didn't expect it to be as enjoyable as this. Okay, the weather has really helped, but what an experience.
This film is actually more of a personal journey than it might appear. As I researched the film, I discovered that on my grandfather's side there was a man living in the right time period called Hugh Baird, also from Edinburgh. Now, wouldn't it be ironic if it was the same Hugh Baird that had engineered the Union Canal? It certainly left me with something to investigate further within my own family tree.
Now, as I approach the end of the Union Canal, we have to remember that this canal only really happened because of the father of canals, the Forth and Clyde Canal, engineered by John Smeaton. Now, the connection between the Union and the Forth and Clyde is no longer with us. Once it fell into repair, the locks and the connectivity was broken. But tomorrow I'm meeting Chris from Scottish Canals, and he's going to explain to me how the canals once joined together and how indeed they are now joined today, because that is an incredible story.
I met up with Chris O'Connell, a historian and archaeologist working for Scottish Canals, and he showed me a buried relic from the past.
Chris, what you were just talking as we were walking here. What is the relevance of this junction point?
Well, we're just here now. So in 1822, when the two canals were joined, they were joined by a series of 11 locks. The locks start at the top of the Union Canal. They come through this wooded area, which we can have a look at in a minute. They swept around, pretty much following the line of this road, all the way down to Lock 16, where they joined the Forth and Clyde Canal. So 11 locks with associated basins. It would take you all day to get up and down the canal in a boat, basically. So as one boat's going up the way and the boat's coming down, one would shift into the basin like a bypass almost to let the others through. So very busy, nice pub at the end that you can get a little snifter or something while you're waiting for your horse and boat to make its way down. We'll see the pub. It's called the Union Inn.
So to just fully appreciate and understand this, I find this quite sort of historically incredible. Literally where that car is driving now would have been a canal.
Yeah, a series of locks. Yeah, canal.
And we'll just let him go. And when was that filled in?
The 1930s, about 1932, when the Union Canal was closed and it was all filled in. I'm not sure when the road was built over it, but it was 1932 that the lock flight was actually shut and then subsequently infilled. However, you can still see one of the locks or the top of the masonry copestones. We can go and have a look at that, give you a sense of the size of them.
So Chris, we've just come up that little path with that nice little wooded area, but where are we now?
Well, on the Union Canal, virtually the historic terminus of the canal. So the Union Canal travelled a little further along there to a place called Port Maxwell. That's no longer there. In the millennium, when we rebuilt the canal, you go along there, we put an extension that takes you to the Falkirk Wheel. But the original connection between the Union Canal here and the Forth and Clyde Canal at the bottom of the hill was through a series of locks, 11 locks, and some of them survive in this wooded area. The rest are under the road that we just filmed on earlier. So I don't know if you want to just jump in and see if we can see one. It's quite heavily vegetated, but...
Find some hidden locks.
Okay, Kevin, follow me and we'll see if we can locate the first lock. What you're looking for are big masonry blocks that should be poking out of this vegetation somewhere. And might be this way. It's all right, it's been a while since I've been here and it's very overgrown. Do you want me to find it first, Kevin, and film after? Or?
Well, no, we will. This is part of the adventure, if we can. I've got shorts on, so I want to be careful of the stinging nettles.
I think back the other way. I don't think we're going to get through that route. Okay. Obviously, it's the time of year when the vegetation's...
Chris is doing his Indiana Jones.
Well, I could do with a machete right enough.
Trying to find the hidden lock. The hidden lock stones is quite dense vegetation actually. So, but I love this kind of storytelling, this kind of active archaeology that somewhere hidden here is the remnants of the past. And it was, as Chris mentioned, it was infilled. And you know, that has been lost to the sands of time. And it takes people like Chris, who's an archivist and an archaeologist for Scottish Canals, to actually understand that these things are still here and they're still part of our living history. I think he's like a dog in a forest at the moment. He's really enjoying himself trying to find it.
Okay, I found it, Kevin.
Oh, have you found it?
Yeah.
Right, he's found it. So so I'm gonna stop filming a second, and I'm gonna find him in the forest. See what he's doing. Let's have a look.
So Kevin, we're literally entering the lock now. You can see just the difference in the vegetation here kind of gives it away. But more importantly, there's the copestones. That's the original lock wall we can see in here, look. I didn't bring my trowel with me, but... Do you see that? That stonework there?
Wow.
So that's the top. There's a wall on the other side. Do you want to walk through the lock? get down to the bottom?
I've noticed there's stinging nettles and I've got shorts
yeah, no,
on.
that's quite nippy. So what you're looking at though, Kevin, is you're now in the beginning of the lock. So there's a lock gate here, just behind us. That's the lock. You can see the difference in the vegetation there. Lock gate at the bottom. On that side, there would have been an oval-shaped basin or an irregular-shaped basin where the boats would pull in to allow other boats to pass as they come up and down the lock. So this lock flight to get you to the bottom of the hill was 11 locks. And then you'd make your way off to the Forth and Clyde Canal along a stretch and, as I say, have a pint in the Union Inn or whatever it was they drank back in the day. Pint of porter, maybe.
I know this sounds a bit dramatic. Actually, I'll do it this way. I know this sounds a bit dramatic, Chris, but it's almost like Indiana Jones. I mean, you're sort of going through almost like a jungle and then discovering archaeology, really.
Well, it is. I'm just grateful that we're not being shot at or
no.
with any
poison arrows
or poison arrows. But no, it is. I mean, it's a hidden gem. In the winter, when all this dies down, you can see much more of the stonework. I mean, it's really quite well preserved. You can see more of it in there, and if I went through in there, you'll get the feeling. So the width of it, you'll get an understanding of the width. Here's another. Let's get rid of that.
I wish I was wearing my trousers.
Well, that's all right. I've got them on. I'm happy. So there's the other. That's the other side. Can you make that out there?
Yeah, just about. There's a big stinging nettle here, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's the width of the lock.
Wow.
I know, isn't it?
But you know, and I hope people watching this can appreciate this kind of U-shape almost. You can really imagine, literally, you're standing at the bottom of a canal, basically. Yeah.
So this has been infilled in 1930s, as I said. So the depth of this goes way down. You know, all this material is infill. The lock would have been several feet deep and would have been full of water. So in 1932, when they infilled them for safety reasons. Obviously, the canal was closed, so they backfilled the lock chambers. But this is so I would imagine that all the others are equally preserved, but they're all under vegetation now. This being at the top it just managed that this last 2 or 3 feet of masonry wall was left exposed.
Chris explained that these were the only lock gates used on the Union Canal, and that's because in essence the Union Canal was a contour canal.
So what's a contour canal, Chris?
A contour canal is built on one contour, in this case 80 metres above sea level, I should say. So what that means is you're hugging the contour all the way from Edinburgh to Falkirk without the need to go up and down a hill. And if you don't need to move up and down a hill, then you don't need locks, because you don't need to move a boat, because boats can't sail up a hill without locks, and they can't get the other side without locks. So these are the only locks technically on the Union Canal, and they're here because of the height difference from the Union Canal down to the Forth and Clyde Canal. So you needed to step those boats down. Now, which way did we come in? I can show you some of what we needed was a ball of string.
Are we gonna meet at some point? Or are we gonna die in this forest?
Well, I'm sure I'm determined to get out. But as I say, best visited during the winter months.
Well, viewers, this has been an epic adventure on YouTube, and it's been a real honour to make this film. I think in 10 years' time, a camera will be found in the woods. and the bodies of two people, one carrying a life jacket on land, will be found. That was
Did you enjoy that?
That was a real adventure.
No, it's good fun, and we've had college kids in here and school children, and they love it. They love it. Why do you do? Because it's a bit of an adventure. It's a bit of the unknown. What's in there?
What I love about it is it's living archaeology, isn't it?
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
You know, you can really see where it started, and then you go 50 metres or so into the forest, and there it is. There's the canal that's now gone.
And although we've got old photographs and we've got plans and maps, it's not the same as actually getting about it. It brings it to life. Yeah. If you get you get a sense of the place,
Yeah.
Even the difficulty getting in and out.
Yeah.
But it's fun. You don't get that from a photograph.
No.
So it's,
Wow.
it should be a hands-on experience.
Right, should we go back?
Best had. You haven't, no equipment up there?
No,
We're all good?
No. Let's go, right.
Chris took me in his car for a short drive following the original route of the Union Canal. He took me to an unassuming block of concrete that actually had real historical relevance.
Actually, this unassuming lump of concrete here is the original entrance into the Forth and Clyde Canal.
Hang on, whoa. Hang on, say that again?
This is the original entrance into the Forth and Clyde Canal. This is where the flight of locks that we were just on exited into the canal. So that was blocked off in 1932, but what you've got to imagine here, that this was access through with boats. And on my left here, all this grassy knoll here, was a big basin. So the lock flight come down the road we drove down, emptied out into this basin where the boats would turn, luggage, goods on and off the boats, the Union in, and then you'd sail off into the Forth and Clyde Canal there.
This actually blows me away, actually. I think this is just living archaeology. I mean, how many people would just walk by here and not give it literally a second thought, you know? But to understand that this was where the Union once joined the Forth and Clyde at this very point, 100 years ago or so, I would be standing in a canal, and that these two giant waterways were joined. And yet, if it wasn't for the imagination and the foresight of people 20 years ago or so, and the Falkirk Wheel, these waterways would have been separate. But now, of course, they're joined as one, as they should be. I just love living history and living archaeology.
My time with Chris had been really enjoyable, but now it was time to get on my bike and conclude my Union Canal journey.
Today, I've already gone through a spectacular tunnel, the Falkirk Tunnel, built 200 years ago. But ahead of me is a rather new addition to the Union Canal. It's called the Rough Castle Tunnel, and it was built at the turn of the millennium. And its job, well, its job was to once again reconnect the Union Canal with its great-great-grandfather, the Forth and Clyde Canal.
This had been an incredible journey, a combination of adventure and history, both old and new. Engineering wonders of the past juxtaposed with engineering wonders of the future, and probably the Falkirk Wheel sums this up best. Once again rejoining the Union with its father, the Forth and Clyde.
I'm becoming a bit of a tunnel geek. I really enjoyed that. Okay, not as much as the Falkirk Tunnel, that was in the league of its own, but that's a 200-year-old tunnel. But that is pretty amazing. But more importantly, where it takes you out is it takes you out to that. That is the Falkirk Wheel. Now, to do that story justice, I'm actually going to spend 48 hours encamped on this site because there is so much going on in this area. Not only the Falkirk Wheel, which to be honest could be one of the engineering marvels of the 21st century, but also this whole area was once a Roman settlement. So like I said, I'm going to spend pretty much almost 2 days here because I really want to explore and discover what this area has to offer. Ah, what a glorious day I've had. Really thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I've actually just made it to the Falkirk Wheel, and I'm gonna, like I mentioned, I'm going to be spending some time here, a couple of days, and I'm actually camping at the Falkirk Wheel. Now officially you're not supposed to, but obviously I've made a few connections when making this film, and they've given me special permission that I can put my little tent by the Falkirk Wheel. But yeah, no, really good. So my plan, oh, and I'm just cooking dinner, hang on, just stir my pasta. So tomorrow the plan is actually to go to the start Lock 1 at Grangemouth on the Forth and Clyde Canal. And that's going to be a separate adventure that I'm going to have along these two fantastic waterways. So I hope you've really enjoyed this part of my great traverse of Scotland along the Union Canal, please do subscribe to my channel. It really does mean a lot. Support really does mean a lot, and subscribers are everything on YouTube. Or give it a like and a little comment. It's always nice to hear from people that are enjoying my films, because I've got tons more planned in the coming months and indeed years. So stay tuned, watch my next adventure along the Forth and Clyde Canal, and that way we're going to join the two stories and the two canals together, the story of the Union and the story of the Forth and Clyde.